about this during the week, Lorraine, in preparation for today. What would you say constitutes AI technology? For example, the scanner at the supermarket.
Yeah. So, yes, this is important to me because I might define it differently, but to me, AI is something that you ask a question, like a prompt or whatever, and it goes off and thinks like a person, tries to think like a person to come up with a solution, with an idea for you. And whereas the smart, like the scanner at a supermarket, to me is just smart technology. It's like both can be, obviously they're both smart technology, but if the scanner or the barcode isn't working, it won't scan it, and you still need somebody to come in and fix it, or to scan it, or type in the numbers underneath the barcode. Whereas with AI, you can just type in whatever you want to get from them, and you can use that information if you want to then yourself. You don't even need to do any changes, any edits. And that to me is like, I don't know. In the creative process, that to me is, and also in job seeking recruitment, it can be it can hinder the processes. That's all it is. That's what I construe AI to be.
Okay. And in any way, like, I suppose we've had the likes of ChatGPT in the last 2 years has just exploded. And, I remember when it first came out, there was people on LinkedIn kind of coming out and saying, and I had a client or a potential client last week who came to me and said, like, why do I need a CV writer when there's AI? I can just put, whatever I have into ChatGPT and that will give me a CV.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people did that, and maybe there's merit. But what would you say the difference there would be? Is there any ways that AI can actually help?
Yeah, like, okay. Even though I'm not a fan of AI, I said yesterday in our little sound check, I've gripes with AI, but it's probably more a broader thinking on the AI itself rather than how you can use AI. And we spoke about Meg. Actually, Meg did write an article about AI as well,
she did, actually,
where it should be used as a tool more so than, a tool to help you with ideas, to help generate information. And with CVs, and I have used it to get ideas for blogs or to get ideas. Actually, it's just for blogs in the sense of job seeking and recruitment. It's just for my blog ideas. Like, a CV created by AI. You just know because it's robotic. It doesn't represent you really. It doesn't have your personality in there where, people who are writers like us would be able to capture with the language, with what we use. I mean, Jared, we've both seen LinkedIn posts as well that are promoting AI to write your resume or CV from scratch. And I know people don't have time to do it. You always have time to do it if you if you sit down and actually think about it. Sometimes it's more that people come to us about it because they generally don't know how to write one. That's fine. But you always have time to put something together. And you can always ask ChatGPT then to maybe give suggestions, but not to write it from scratch, I don't think.
I broadly agree with you on that. And I think, we have seen a lot of kind of AI promoted tools to write CVs on LinkedIn and so forth. And you can kind of look then into, who's putting up these posts? What's the story? What's their background? What do they know about, the actual world of recruitment and CV writing and job seeking and stuff like that? And what they are is the people who are very good at the software side of it, and they don't necessarily, if you delve down into their actual work history, they don't have much experience with recruitment. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have an input or a say or an opinion, and that those opinions aren't valid. But sometimes what happens, I find, is that, as you say, that the results of what you get out of these documents that are being created, they're not great. Like, the formatting on the documents can be a little bit all over the place. They're restricted on what you can actually put in and what you can do with the document. and it kind of lacks, it's just, as you say, kind of robotic. And I think if you look at some of the kind of there's some big influencers or LinkedIn influencers or thought leaders in recruitment at the moment. You probably follow some of the same people that I do, the likes of Andrew McCaskill, Bonnie Dilber, Kristen Fife and stuff like that. And they would see, if you see what they've been doing up on LinkedIn, they would say that over the last number of months, maybe a year or so, the market has just been flooded with CVs that are being generated by AI, and it's very, very hard to separate out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. It's, you know, the CVs that are really, really good and the CVs that are kind of generic, and to the point now where I think a lot of organizations are starting to deploy software that can detect AI written content,
combat that type thing,
to combat that type of thing, because it's making the recruiter's job, you know, so much harder. Like, you know, and I think, you know, we touched on it the last day about ATS systems, and there is this notion out there that an ATS system can make a decision and is automatically rejecting CVs and stuff like that. And actually, you know, if you follow what we said about like the market being flooded with a lot of AI driven CVs and it's slowing recruitment down in many ways. Well, actually, you can actually see that that's not true. That, like, you know, that it's creating more work for the recruiters to go and actually physically eyeball CVs and the content and so on and so forth. Like, you know, but I think the other thing about it is, I think AI is obviously, you know, it's here to stay and it can do some great things. Some very, very simple examples of AI, you know, have been around for a long time. For as long as I can remember, there's been a spell check on Microsoft Word and similar word processing programs. And that is a form of AI. A lot of CV writers or people who write in some way, shape or form, be that for work or for academic stuff and whatever else, will use Grammarly. And again, that's another form of AI and perfectly valid.
That there now can cause a bit of, because grammar is different in Europe and between Europe and North America. Like, or even how I'd say me and you would have some grammar. It's not that it's wrong grammar. It just means that it's a different set of rules if you have it set up for, let's say, North America, or you set it up for Europe. And so when you're going through it, sometimes it picks up words spelled incorrectly. But other times, like for example, when I'm listing something, I don't put a comma before the and. I just have X comma, Y comma, and the. I don't have a comma after the Y, but some people do. Oh, well, I know I just said it there, but you know what I mean? I don't have the
product of Irish education.
Huh?
You're clearly the product of an Irish education.
Must be.
Because I think that's the way that that's the way that we all learned.
And it's still grammatically correct not to have the comma between the and the last, like the second last thing in the list. You know, but some people Grammarly may pick that up as incorrect. And it's like, you just also sometimes need to use your own judgment with it as well. Like
absolutely.
That's the prime example actually of AI itself.
Sure. I think I said it last week, I have rows with Grammarly all the time. But what you said there is really important, because it's about how you actually set it up. So like, you know, when you go in, say, and using Grammarly as an example, when you open your Grammarly account, depending upon what you're writing, you can adjust the settings for, like, you know, an academic paper. You can adjust it so that it's less formal. And that it picks up, as you say, North American, European, slight variances on grammar and stuff like that. And it's, you see, it all goes back to the human input at the back end of it, like, you know. So that human input, I suppose, is really, really, really important, isn't it?
Oh, very important. And just bringing it back actually to what you were talking about. For those who have joined, I have it here in front of me, but we did just talk about ChatGPT and CV writing, and how some people may use ChatGPT to write their CV completely, and they just use that. You were, you know, the impact with that actually, yes, it's very handy. You might get the problem is when you get to the interview, you don't know what was written on that CV, because you can't stand behind what was written on that CV. If it's too flashy, you know, you can ask it to throw in all the keywords and all of that, but, you know, and it might pass and you get the interview. When you get to the interview, you're going to get found out then if the information was incorrect, is all I'm saying. So that's why you definitely need that, bring it back, human input to do it anyway.
Absolutely, and you have to, I suppose you and I, in many ways, we could call ourselves ghostwriters for people. But that person, if I'm writing a CV for you, and you're going out to interview tomorrow, you've got to feel like you own that CV and that it came from you, and I think your process in CV writing is very similar to mine in terms of gathering the information beforehand, and that all the information will come from the client if you're writing it for them, or, if you're writing your own CV yourself. I think sometimes people have this thing in their head that, they'll write their CV in an afternoon or whatever else. Now, if you can do that, fair play.
You can, especially if you need something quick. You can, definitely.
You can. But you've got to be able, I think, to, kind of put a little bit of thought into it. And I think where sometimes people get a bit frustrated with CV writing is, and again, I was actually speaking to a friend last night, and he was saying to me, where I'm struggling, Ger, is to get it all kind of I've done so much, what's important, get it down to being concise. And that's, I suppose in some ways the likes of ChatGPT can help with that. I can say, look, you can throw in your experience and say, condense this down to a 20-word bullet point. But then perhaps are you losing the context there as well? And I suppose it's all around kind of, if you are using an AI tool, be that Grammarly, spell check, ChatGPT, whatever else, how is it set up? What are you telling it? And I think, there's plenty of videos out there on LinkedIn and on YouTube about how to actually get the most out of the likes of ChatGPT. So it's not just, don't just put a random, if you are going down that way to, whether you're writing your CV or whatever else it is, don't just go down the road of putting in.
Write a CV for customer service roles or something.
You've got to be really experience
and whatever.
Yeah, you've got to be really precise in what you're asking it to give you, I suppose. I suppose. Come on.
No, I was just going to say, the way you were saying about how you need to stand behind the CV. Clients want to. That happens even without AI. I've had people, because sometimes we write maybe too strong. Well, I might write too strong something, and that it might be too confident, and some people aren't confident with that confidence. So it's more. So that is important that you do proofread everything that is. If you are using AI, proofread it and make sure it sounds like you, because otherwise, and make sure it is what you've done or achieved.
Yeah. So we're kind of saying, if you're going to be using it, use it as a jumping off point.
As a tool, as a helpful, as a helpful springboard to go into that tool.
Gotta sound like you. And just, I'm going to go down a slight different kind of tangent, if that's okay. So you're saying that sometimes people have the language might be too strong, or people aren't, comfortable with standing behind it. And, I've read a lot of things, both through my studies in academia and, through every day on LinkedIn and different places, that very often it's actually the women are kind of less confident about being brash and bold on their CV or around their achievements or whatever it is, whereas the guys will kind of just, they will amp it up as much as they possibly can. Is that something that you would see?
I think do you know what? I think it does depend. I've had both on both sides of the spectrum with regard to the demographics of the people. I think it depends, how now, let's say when they come to me, how they want to position themselves at this point. So they may decide, no, I don't want to highlight all the actual, the strong achievements, maybe the quantifiable ones, because I want to move to be more that softer people side of things, managerial and leadership and guidance and mentorship. And so that's important. And that's something that we as writers will always try and ascertain at the start. And that could happen with whether you're a male or female, it just depends on where they want to position themselves. But also I try and encourage them to say, look, you did achieve these things and it is quite, impressive. And think of the process behind getting that, and that can help you in the interview type thing. But it only takes a change of one word anyway. Sometimes, most of the time, a verb changes the entire meaning of one sentence. But that is the difference that AI can't capture. They can't capture that tone of, they can't capture that.
It's like the essence of the person, isn't it?
The essence of the person. Yeah, because even talking to them, people, you always get a feel of a person just by talking to them. Whereas an AI doesn't know you. They're a robot. They don't know how to work with people.
A little bit of time talking about CVs and the impact of AI and on CVs and stuff like that. I suppose perhaps it's fair to say that I've perhaps done a little bit more recruitment than you over my years. So I suppose what I wanted to just touch on was one or two places where AI can kind of perhaps add a little bit of value or add to the candidate's experience, or perhaps even detract from the candidate's experience, depending upon how it's used. And before we came online there this morning, we just had a little bit of a chat before we came on, and I mentioned that I took a little bit of a career break between 2015 and 2017. I actually stayed at home, and my son had been diagnosed with autism, and I decided that we were going to, either Amy or I, my wife and I, were going to stay at home for a period of time just to kind of get him up and ready and running and stuff like that. As best we can. So as best we could. So when I went back to work at Guinness, I was asked to look after recruitment. We were kind of rebuilding the whole team in the department that I was attached to, and we were using some technology called HireView. So basically what it was that, I think I mentioned the last time, I was doing kind of a lot of recruitment, and there were 200 or 300 applications coming in for maybe 4 or 5 roles. So it was very, very difficult to manage the time to get through every application and stuff like that. So, the first round we'd have to write the screening of the CVs, and then we'd decide who we'd bring to a video interview. So it was a further screen. And the video interview would be, a link for a video interview would be sent out to the prospective candidate. And we'd have maybe 4 or 5 questions preloaded onto HireView. And it was really just to get a sense of the person and how they communicated, perhaps a little bit about what they valued and how they presented themselves. And it was kind of what came back. And I kind of, there's a couple of things that I would think of on this, right? Yeah. So I hadn't been actually, and I would have liked to have been on the other side of it, right? But what happened was, like, these poor candidates they'd set up their space, and next thing they'd be on camera and video, and this question would flash up on the screen. And they had to answer their question. Now, I think they could edit it as far as I remember, if they weren't too happy with it or whatever, but they're literally just talking to a blank screen. And I was like, well, do you know something? We're kind of recruiting for a brand that's all about people. And it just felt a bit impersonal. But what I did find as well was that sometimes you were leaning into then a bit of unconscious bias, kind of in a slightly less enlightened age where it came to like diversity and inclusion and stuff like that. But we kind of then found ourselves basing a lot of bringing candidates through that maybe were just all a bit samey. We probably missed some great candidates. It was crude, a little bit crude, and I suppose the technology's come on again since then, which is great. But it had its pros and cons, certainly. And certainly what I found was that the candidates that we did then bring forward for actual interview were very consistent with what we saw on the screen, and they were of a better standard, or the standard that we wanted to see come through and work with us in the business. So it was I suppose pros and cons there. I suppose one to watch out for is that kind of sometimes you read that AI can eliminate unconscious bias. Well, it depends what it's been taught, and it depends how it's been set up. At the
end of the day, it's the technology. That's bottom line.
That's it.
Every other technology, you have to get it to do what you want it to do, whether it's to answer questions or whatever, or whether it's to scan a barcode.
That's just it. Have you ever done anything like that where you've had to kind of have an interaction with a non-sentient being, I suppose?
I don't think so. I tend to like to go to people if I can. Now, that's not to say, do you know those chatbots you see on websites?
Yeah.
So those are definitely AI generated. You have questions. If that asks a question, it tells you this answer, that type of stuff, right? So yes, in a way, yes, I have. But then it's very hard to know, because sometimes they are actual people. Because again, they might need to monitor that to make sure that it is saying the right information or something. So in that sense, yes, I have, with maybe automated messages being sent back to me. but not in the field of workplace environments.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you just touch on chatbots, because I think a lot of companies are now starting to use chatbots to gather. Again, it's a screening and it's a kind of a volume issue. I would imagine, like, in an efficiency measure, that you can use the chatbot to gather basic information about somebody, like, basic work experience, qualifications, and so on and so forth. Like, and I think that's kind of perhaps it might even make it a little bit easier in some respects for candidates.
You're right. Like, I was just going to say, it makes sense that, because then you can, again, you said it was screening, but yeah, it helps to, if you don't have that experience, and it's like, oh, sorry, like, maybe we're not looking for that level, or
that's it, like, and I suppose the other side of it is as well that, or another side of it, if not the other side of it, is that sometimes, especially in those kind of high volume roles where you've got lots of people applying, you often see people complaining, going, God, the communication with the company was terrible, like, and I never got anything back, whether it was an acknowledgement, or whether it was an update or whatever else, like, now, I think there's an unrealistic expectation sometimes that people are expecting human beings to come back to them every single time that there is an that you submit an application, or are expecting to hear something back. Like, in an ideal world, that's great. And hopefully, I think more and more companies are moving towards a place where they can actually, there's something kind of more than the generic, no, you don't meet the qualifications, wish you best of luck, good luck, we'll see you again sometime, like, and there are some companies that have some really, really powerful messages that are saying, look, unfortunately, you haven't come through on this occasion, you haven't met our screening requirements, but we'd really love to see you back again, and, here's a voucher for a cup of coffee or something like that, like, for taking the time, and, there's some nice kind of exchanges, because I think sometimes even when you're rejecting, you want people to come back again, like, if they're qualified for another role in your job, so you don't want to kill them and kill their application or kill their enthusiasm for your organization in the first altogether, like, but it also can be kind of good about, like, where it can be good is to let them know, well, you've moved from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 of the process, and we've scheduled an interview for you at 4:00 on Wednesday afternoon. And I think that's probably a little bit better than kind of hanging around by your phone waiting for a hiring manager who was probably up their eyeballs with everything else that's going on in their day job to give you a call, like, so I suppose there's the other side of it is, do you think that might be a bit impersonal?
Me, I don't know. I think if it helps to streamline a process, especially if you're in a bigger company, like, for example, like you were in Guinness, like, if it's a big company or an organization that normally would receive high volumes of candidates, having it set up where it automatically sends those emails for those who do not meet the criteria, to me, I think that's fine. It's more if you are successful that maybe, obviously, again, if you're successful, those emails are fine, because it helps to streamline that process. It means that they don't have to worry about going through it and sending that email or scheduling the emails. It's just like, right, do they have the criteria or not? Or maybe it might go through another filter, whatever it might be, but at least it is, managed better that way. So I think it benefits the recruitment process in that regard. Just it shouldn't be the sole thing. Like, I know you have something there on the screen, but like we mentioned, we were talking about job descriptions as well. Like, I think that some human input for a job description, I know that they may be busy, but a little bit of input to a job description from a human sense as to what the nature of the job is at that point will help to refine, or then you can use the AI then to refine it and make it better. But I wouldn't just go write a job description for this type of job and then use that, because you can't. It's not, to me, that's not what the job might be in that business or at that time, because they're always dynamic. So that's just a quick little thing on that for me.
Hey, Colin, great to hear from you, and thanks for coming in. Is AI for recruitment like the old school metric of binning every CV at work go that's over 2 pages? It depends on the human element of it, really, doesn't it? And it's what AI is being told to do. So I think that if you look back at our first one, I think that, there was very, very strict rules going back the years over like a CV is 1 page, CV is 2 pages and stuff like that. I think what we're moving to more and more is a case where the CV is as long as it needs to be once it's delivering value and once it's not full of fluff, if you know what I mean. That's the important part of it.
Yeah, like in all fairness, my rule of thumb is 3 pages maximum. But I was asked to do a 4-page CV at the behest of the client. So I was like, that's fine. But 3 pages maximum. You can't predict what is being said behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But I think that if they are being biased with a 2-page CV, because then it's like, or anything more than 2 pages, I think they might, set that limit of if it's 13 pages. I've seen CVs that are 13 pages. There's no need, that type of thing. And you're like, then maybe, or some people attach this could be for another episode, attaching a cover letter to the CV, which means that it's now 3 pages, not 2. They're 2 separate documents. So I think it's something that you just need to send it in. If you have it 2 pages, great. 1 page is fine if you can't, get any more information, and 3 pages, absolute max. Yeah. Send it in and hope for the best is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the point there that you make about nuance, Colin, is really important too. I did a CV for somebody a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of the person's story required nuance to say, well, how did they get from A to B to C? And, they were kind of somebody who'd changed career mid-track as well, so that it needed a little bit more of background commentary within the CV, and then storytelling, and in that particular CV, in many instances, see bullet points being 25, 30 words less, sometimes. And there was not being too texty. In that instance, there was kind of a requirement nearly to go a little bit beyond that in some instances, but the layout of the CV actually did help it to make it a little bit more readable. And actually, we're really, really proud of the CV that we delivered together, because you could see the trajectory that this person's career had been on and how it was actually logical for them to go from where they started to the very, very, very senior and successful position that they ended up in. So yeah, it's spot on. I think nuance is really, really important.
Yeah, and it also, again, these are things that we will touch on at future episodes and things. But the difficulty there is then if you're going into the nuances, it's then, okay, is it now going to be a 5-pager, or something like that?
Yeah.
So that's where all the other documents complement each other. So the cover letters or the LinkedIn profile or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Also, sometimes how you format the CV, lay it out. You might push something forward on the first page, showing that direction or highlighting certain achievements that you want to bring forward, which then limits the need almost to have to explain the nuances or in detail. I'm saying, in detail.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
It's just, again, that's a knack, that's a trick that we've refined over years. So it's not something I'm not saying people can't do it. It's just to know what is the right thing to put in and stuff like that. And that's where, again, AI may not know that. They may not know. So when you're writing the CV, but also in recruitment on the other side, it's very hard to gauge.
I think if in doubt, you're making sure that your very best material, you're finding a way to get it onto front and center of page 1 in some way, shape, or form. And I know that when I first started writing CVs, I'd have a section on the front that was your key areas of impact. And, they were like extended bullet points, they were kind of okay, I'm really good at team working, and you'd write 2 or 3 sentences about that. And I kind of felt over time that actually, do you know what, this is just fluff. Whereas the person might have had something that happened 5 or 6 years ago or 2 roles ago in their career that was really, really important, but it was buried on the bottom of page 2 because we were sticking rigidly to this reverse chronological kind of thing. So actually, for the most part, I've replaced that section with what's called what I call a signature achievement section. So that no matter when it happened in somebody's career, I'm making sure that that's getting onto page 1, and then that's kind of sticking out of whatever or whoever is conducting that screen of your CV.
Again, that's more a person thinking, bringing it back. That's more a person going, actually, this would work better this way.
Yeah.
And where it is, rather than, because the AI generate software will just throw it at you, and you have to rejig it, or you may not think that you have to rejig it, that type of thing. So it's all nuanced, the whole thing, isn't it? AI, recruitment, job seeking. But I guess if there's not, I'm not saying that there's nothing else, just to close it off, this particular topic before we finish up, I guess. Jer sent me an article regarding just The Simpsons. Everyone has an idea on who The Simpsons are, what The Simpsons are. Watch some of The Simpsons, I'm pretty sure. But it was about their finale. Basically, in a nutshell, the finale is all AI generated. And one of the quotes that was said from the writer, Matt Selman, was, AI is good at regurgitating, but not at being imaginative. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I don't know if you do, but I do, because I think it's kind of affecting the creative process as a whole. And writing a CV is creative in its own way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's your mic drop moment, Lorraine.